I ask you to think back to 2006. As late as 2006, it was widely believed that a major global economic downturn crisis could not occur. Cycles had been abolished because we, the global financial community, the people running it, managing it, were smarter and more intelligent than those people who had lived through crises in the past. As it turned out, as we all so well know, that was not the case. And we are reminded that whenever we hear that phrase, this time is different when it comes to global economy, be careful and get ready. In 2009, our minds are dominated by the economic crisis and all the pain and anguish and uncertainty and fear that it has created. Yet our eyes are on the future, the nature of the recovery, I think fair to say, coming faster than had been expected, and how that recovery will affect and reshape the world of energy. And the shapers are two powerful forces. One is that quest for clean energy, driven by the needs of contemporary civilization, and more than anything else, as we know, by the climate challenge, as Copenhagen will shortly demonstrate, and as already we heard through the APEC meeting. And that will be an intensified drive. But at the same time, there are the energy requirements for economic growth. For our $60 trillion world economy rests upon an energy foundation. And that will be true when it's $70 trillion, and when it's $100 trillion, and when it's $120 trillion. We need availability of energy. We need security of energy. During a time of recession, when you have a big supply overhang as we do today, people worry less about security. But in 2 or 3 years, those security concerns will come to the fore again. Resources will need to be developed, and we'll need enough depth and diversification to provide security and to prepare and be able to cope with the dangers of disruption. The complexity is brought home by competing stories of the future. There's a Copenhagen story that by 2030, carbon emissions should be reduced by 83%. Obviously, we recognize that there are differences in points of view of developed and developing nation, but call that the Copenhagen story, the 2050 story. But then there's the 2030 story, that world energy demand by 2030 will have increased by 40 to 50% from where it is today, driven by economic growth. And by the way, 80% of that energy will be hydrocarbons. If you see, it is a puzzle. How do these two stories fit together? And I think that's what all who are concerned with energy wrestle with. That reality, nowhere is that reality more vivid than in Asia, the centerpiece of economic growth. The financial crisis made clear that not only are the consumers of the developed country, in the United States and the other developed country, but also now the emerging markets of Asia are the co-drivers of the world economy. And as Asia itself becomes a more and more integrated economy, it's not just a national issue, but a regional issue, foundation for regional economic growth in what is this very increasingly interconnected region. And it's an urgent issue. This highlights the need for consistent, long-term, balanced growth, and also for policies that support this kind of growth, that provide the framework. It's that framework that you need to make the long-term investments. So, as a starting point for this consideration, we can start with a very simple fact. Recessions do end. Sometimes when you're in a recession, it's hard to remember that. The period of financial panic ended really, I think we can go back and say it's February of March, 9-10 months ago. And now we're looking at the question of the uneven speed of economic recovery. But as I say, once you get past the financial panic, recessions do end. But it leaves and creates for us many questions for the future. One, it reopens that question about what's the right balance between the state and the market. As we look back, we can recognize that we've been really riding a 30-year wave in which the world moved towards greater confidence in markets. And that confidence even survived the crisis that swept so brutally through this region a decade ago. Now, we hear people saying, that the world is backing away from markets. Well, we need to think about what that means, because sometimes I forget that the shift to markets really took two forms. One is that Singapore and other nations in Asia made that fundamental decision to cast their fate with the world economy, as opposed to the traditional development model of economic self-sufficiency. It took confidence in markets to do that, and it has paid off for this region and for the world economy. So one form of confidence in markets was confidence in a global marketplace. The other was a confidence in a more flexible, more open, more competitive, more market-oriented organization of domestic economies. So, is that over in both dimensions? If we think about this APEC meeting, what was the phrase, the constant worries about protectionism, and we hear the talk about protectionism, but I don't think that in any fundamental way in this era of globalization that nations are going to turn their backs on the global marketplace. Globalization is not going to go away, although we can ask a question, how well is globalization going to function? And that is maybe the more important question to grapple with. The other part of it is, will there be less confidence in market economies, market systems? Is there a need for better regulation? Absolutely. Is there a need for a better global system of regulation? Absolutely. Will there be more control? In the short term, yes. But over the longer term, confidence does need to be restored, not only in the financial markets, which is what's been happening, but also in the market system. And that confidence, I think, after what we've been through, has to be earned back. It's not going to happen overnight. So, some turning away from markets, but we don't yet know the degree. And the degree will partly depend upon the answer to a question. What's that question? The question is, what caused the crisis? The other day, I sat down, I'd been keeping a list of it, and I counted about a dozen different explanations for the global economic crisis, all of which are held with various degrees of certainty. There's the arguments that it was all really about housing debt and housing bubble and government policies that promoted it. Or another argument, it was really about the ingenious ability of the financial industry to manufacture new financial instruments. Another argument is about global imbalances. Another is that it's a failure of regulation to keep up. Another is that it's all really about human nature, about fear and greed. Another is that it's an inevitable response to 5 years of really good global economic growth. And don't forget also another explanation, it has to do with what happened to commodity prices and oil prices. And if you note in the report, and we'll hear, I think, tomorrow from Mr. Tanaka, the head of the International Energy Agency, they point out that what happened with commodity prices was also a factor in the downturn. Oh, yes, and there was also another explanation for this global financial crisis, and that was the conviction that it could never happen. So all of those came together and meant that risk was underappreciated and underpriced.